Awesome. So good morning, everyone. Happy Monday and happy first training for our spring catalog. So yay. Super excited about some of the new topics we have for spring and also to go over some of the ones that we have recurring for either staff who haven't been able to attend in the past or any new staff who are new to the topic. So welcome. So I know folks are very familiar with Zoom by now, since this has been a popular platform for the last 2 years now, since we've been, a lot of us working virtually. But for some of the features we're going to use today is the mute function. So on the bottom left-hand side, you'll see the little microphone. You can click it to mute and unmute yourself. So throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, any comments, go ahead and come off mute and engage with us today for our training. I know we already mentioned it earlier, but if you have video capability, please turn your video on to interact in today's training, please. On the right-hand side, you'll see under participants is the chat feature. Just make sure next to two that you're clicking everyone so that we all see any questions that you may have. And you can also use that as a way to communicate throughout today's training as well. I think I covered everything, but if you have any questions, feel free. I'm under CSH hosts. Actually, I'll change this to my name so folks can know to inbox me if you have any questions or need help troubleshooting any technical issues throughout the training. So I'm gonna pass it over now to our awesome presenter, and we'll get started with today's presentation.
Thanks, Kaya.
No problem.
Good morning, everybody. How are you? We've missed you in the break. I am going to, here we go. We're going to talk about motivational interviewing today. And as you guys know, this is a required training for the permanent supportive housing part. How many people have taken this training before? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. Yeah. Have you taken it through the CSH thing? No? Okay, that's good. Good. We always double check because some people were assigned to this training 3 and 4 times, and I'm sure it made them a little crazy, right? You don't have to take it 3 or 4 times. You just need to take it once. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about motivational interviewing. So I'm Andrea White. I know most of you. I'm from Housing Innovations. So we're working with CSH on this catalog, and I do a bunch of the trainings, so you'll see them. So the goals for this training is to be able to implement some motivational interviewing techniques into your practice, right? And the goal for this training is to be able to address where people lose motivation in terms of permanent supportive housing. So we're not going to go through the whole Megillah of motivational interviewing. We're going to go through the basics, and we're going to really focus on implementation. Okay. So if you can put your name in the chat, how you'd like to be addressed. And I see most people have done that, which is great. And then, as Kaya said, please, you want to unmute and talk, that's fine. We have no problem with that. We'd like that, right? If you want to raise your hand or wave like this to try to get our attention, we'll say something. Okay. So Kaya and I will both be watching it. If you want to put something in the chat, that's great. But as much as you talk to us, the better this training will be. Let's face it. If you just let me talk for 2 hours, you're going to be bored, right? Nobody can take that. So let's talk about this. So in order to get us in some sort of space where we're more comfortable and we know each other a little bit better, I would love to do this verbally, but we've got a lot of people in this training. So think about, just reflect back on summer, okay? It's getting there, right? It's warming up. So think, what do you like best? The beach, the pool, the lake, the river. Some people say their bathtubs. Okay, whatever you like. What do you like about water, right? And you can also say if you don't like water. But what do you like? Connecticut's got a lot of options. Talk about what you like. And just think about being there for a minute. Okay, so put it in the chat. Up, here we go. I'm getting lake, beach, a lot of beach. Oh, a lot of beach. Okay, yep, Long Island Sound is a great place to go. Great. You thinking about that beach? That's good. Couple of lakes. No wise guy things. Oop, pool. We got a pool. Okay. Shower. There we go. You like the shower the best. Yeah, on a hot day, there's nothing like that. Okay. A lot of beach, the brook and the woods. Ooh, that's nice. It sounds cool. Rhode Island, Narragansett. Narragansett's got some great beaches. Jamaica. Now we're talking. The beach preferably. Great. So just think about being there for a minute. Okay. Let's try the next one. So we're going to do a short interview overview, not an interview, an overview of motivational interviewing. We're going to talk about some core theories and practices. This is sometimes also referred to as the spirit of MI, right? We're going to do some tools, and then we're going to apply the practice. So we're going to start it out with a poll, and I am going to launch this poll, and it's multiple choice. So I'll read it to you while you're there. Okay, I am doing this right now. There we go. I'm going to launch this poll. You'll see it come up. Okay. Does everybody see it? Yep. Okay. So where in your practice do you see motivation most lagging? Where do you wish people had more motivation? Connection with a worker at move-in, connection with a worker after 3 months. That was my big problem. Motivation to manage financial obligations. I got no money after the second of the month. Motivation to connect with family, motivation to connect with services, motivation to connect with supports, and motivation to move on. What are you seeing? You can choose as many as you like. Okay. Financial obligations is a big one here. Okay, come on. I know it's harder when it's multiple choice. Yeah. A couple of seconds. Here we go. Some people play music during these polls. It makes me completely nervous to play music. Okay, we got about 61%. We'll give it a couple more seconds. Y'all, I know this pops up over your email, so people have got to be seeing it. Come on. There we go. Getting there. All right. Okay. I'm going to end the poll. We're at 76%. That's pretty good. And let's take a look. Okay. So a big one, financial obligations, right? That's a big place where people lose motivation. Increasing income comes right directly behind that, right? Connecting with supports, and motivation to move on. Those are all the big ones. It's really interesting to me that only 3 people said that connection with the worker at move-in is a lower thing. And that was usually a problem. So that's a great thing, right? Or only 6 people said connection after 3 months. Motivation to connect with families, that was only 5 people, okay? Motivation to maintain housing was only 6 too, so that was interesting. So let's think about that when where people lose motivation as we're talking through these concepts. Does that make sense? Okay. you. Is it off your screen now? With Zoom is I can't see your screens, so I'm always asking people. Up, here we go. Taking it down again. Let's see. All right. Okay. So if we're thinking about how to increase people's motivation, we need to think about techniques that help people think about the reason they want to do something. So let me ask you all something, okay? You ever gotten in a relationship with somebody that there was a few little things you wanted to change? You don't have to answer verbally. Most people have done that. I've certainly done that. Yeah, and how'd that work out for you? People change those? No, right? Okay, so the truth is in case management, it reflects real life, right? So people don't change behavior just because somebody else wants them to, even if they really like the worker, right? You know what? People don't really change behavior long-term, even if somebody makes them, right? So the best way is for people to figure out a reason for them to change behavior. Think about yourself. Why do you change behavior? Because there's a reason, right? Anybody here in school to get a diploma to increase your income?
It's for my religious studies.
Say it again.
My religious studies.
Your religious studies. Okay. And so why are you doing that?
You're
doing that so that what happens?
So I can better enhance my understanding and learning of my relationship with Jesus and, you know, my Christianity and faith and all that, to be able to better provide information when I'm preaching from the pulpit.
There we go. So it's to improve your skills for your job, for your role, right? It's probably also religious studies give you a better feeling about the connection, right? So there's some peace that comes with that. There's some other things. So this is a great example. You've got two reasons, right? You're improving your job skills, which is the pastor skills, but you're also going for comfort, right? And an improved relationship. Those are good reasons. So would you be willing to do it if somebody said, you know, Robin, I think this is what you have to do? Probably not, right? Unless you could feel that thing yourself. That's what we want to work with clients about, right? Whatever motivates them. And I appreciate the spiritual and the faith-based, because that is oftentimes what motivate people, right? The other thing for the people we serve in the faith-based, it's being part of a group. It's being part of something. It's having like beliefs with other people and being able to pursue goals together with the same understanding. And that's a really important thing to people, right? People need to feel connected. So those are things we want to think about. What is their reason for changing the skills? And you know what? It's not us, and we don't want it to be us. Because if it's us that's making people change behavior, then we're going to get in a 1-800, where's my case manager situation every time something happens. You familiar with that technique? 1-800, call you on the phone. Where you been? Where you been? I needed you, right? We want people to internalize some of these things so that they have the skills, right? So that they can move forward. And if they can identify the reason why, that's where we're going. So that oftentimes people are ambivalent. Well, I don't really want to go back to school, or I don't really want to do this, or I don't really want to pay rent because, you know, I got this check day girlfriend or boyfriend who comes by and gives me a lot of pleasure. And I like that. You're familiar with that situation? Everybody know what a check day girlfriend or boyfriend is? Yeah. Okay. So that would engender some ambivalence, right? It's the simplest ambivalence we know. It's immediate goals versus long-term goals, right? So people have got to have a reason to keep that long-term goal, which is housing. And that's what we're going to help people resolve. Okay, we ready for this? So how are we going to do it? We're going to be behavior specific, right? Because motivation for maintaining housing may be different than motivation for financial, right? So we want to look at the with the behavior specific motivation. We want to look for what it is about the person, right? So there may be things that come up that are cultural. There may be things that are come up that are racial. There may be things that are come up that are based on the person's experience. It might be gender-based, right? So let me give you a gender-based example. A woman has never had control of her money. Somebody else has always controlled her money, right? And what happens is she gets money and she spends it, right? And she doesn't seem to be able to think about the long term. So what's going to happen, right? She's not going to see the motivation that this will help her keep housing because she can't imagine a world where she can hold on to her money, where somebody's not going to take it from her, right? It's a very simple example. So we need to think about the person specific. We need to think about what comes from their experience. We need to think about what's real for the person and deal with that. And we need to have this person who's never been able to hold on to money because people kept taking it from her, first her parents and then every boyfriend she ever had, is that, okay, how can this be different? And how can she hold on her money? And then we can deal with what's the difference, right? So we need to know what it's based on. We also need to know that compliance doesn't equal change. You know, when the people I worked with were compliant or did what I said, I was usually so shocked that I could barely speak. And then the other part was I was really happy. And I thought, they are listening to me. But mostly it was to make me be quiet and be happy for a minute, right? Sometimes it was they were actually listening to me, but it was only if they internalized it. So we want to know if they internalize it, right? External pressure is short-lived. We don't want a situation where the people we serve in the supportive housing only change behavior when we're in sight, right? We're going to really avoid that 1-800, where's my case manager thing. We want them to own it, and we want them to own it and how hard this is. Change is hard for people. I don't know about you all, but change is hard for me. I don't like change. You know, most people like 5% change in their life, no more than 5% change. That's what the research tells us, right? How much change are people that you're serving having in their life? Huge amounts, right? So there's a lot of anxiety attached to it. We can't order people to change, or we can order people to change, but it doesn't make much sense and it doesn't really work. But we can influence change. So influence and motivation can come from the worker, but the job of the worker is, and we are going to talk about how to influence change, right? But the job of the worker is to give people enough time and reasons to internalize it. And that's what we're working on today. So here's a graphic about motivational interviewing. See that car? It's a cool car, right? But we are not in the driver's seat. Okay, I don't know about you all, but when I was a case manager and still today, I am a control freak, okay? And the thought of me not driving gave me something to think about, okay? Most case managers have to be control freaks, right? But the client is driving and we don't have a brake on our side. We don't have steering. We got nothing. We got talking. That's what we got, is talking. So in order to move things forward, which is really our job, is we have to come to a common understanding about where we're going. We have to acknowledge that there's lots of different choices to get where we're going, right? And we have to help people think critically about the steps, which means we want people to make a critical decision, right? In order to do that, they have to know the positives and negatives. But the thing we want to think about, right, is helping them with critical thinking, because critical thinking will help them internalize some of this stuff. We want to help them move forward. That's our job. not to pick the steps, and we're going to recognize success. This is what motivational interviewing is. I have to say, in motivational interviewing, if people make a decision about a technique they want to do that's dangerous, yes, we step in and say, no, right? We may work it with critical thinking, but we're also going to step in. But besides that, if we think it's never going to work, we're going to try it with them, right? And then we're going to reframe the setback and we're going to try something else. It's a useful thing to tell people to try several things. So that's what we're going to do. It's not completely comfortable for the worker. I get that. Okay. So the theory this is based on is ambivalence, or not being sure where you want to go, is normal. All of us have it. We have a way, but ambivalence, you can resolve it by looking at their motivations, looking at their histories, looking at the way they've done things before, looking at what the choices are, and engaging in critical thinking. It reinforces that collaboration that you have with the people you serve, right? I mean, look, we know what it looks like. If you ever had somebody who said, do you have any goals? I don't know. And you know, your supervisor is on your back, so you just write down some goals and a plan. How'd that plan work? Probably not great, right? So we need to collaborate with people on all different levels. And part of motivational interviewing teaches you that collaboration. It's also empathetic. We try to put ourselves in the client's shoes, see what they're thinking. We also ask a lot of questions because we can't completely be in their shoes. It's supporting them. It's directive, right? It's a counseling style, and it's a style that we want to integrate into every interaction. It means we recognize when people start to argue with us or really push back, maybe we ought to look at what theory we're pushing, right? Somebody once described motivational interviewing as dancing as opposed to wrestling. Okay. So let's talk about us, right? How does this help staff? One is ultimately it is all the client's decision. So this reduces frustration. It gives us a way to work with people who are not saying they're ready for change. It gives us a way to work with people when they're stuck. We're going to take some stages of change in motivational interviewing and we're going to mush them up together. It gets us out of those struggles, right? If you've ever felt yourself saying, or even if you didn't say it, if you're thinking, how many times are we going to have to go over this? I mean, I felt like that, right? Are you kidding me? How many times are we going to have to go over this? You got to pay rent. Okay. Means we have to back up. We have to try another technique, and we have to assess the motivation. The other thing is, if people feel backed in a corner, how do they react? Think about yourselves. If you feel backed in a corner, how do you react? I'm going to get out of that corner, right? That's not the relationship we want to have with people. So people are fighting, we want to back up, and we want to figure out what's going on. We don't want to be in a power struggle with people. Maybe you guys are better at power struggles than me, but I know every time I get in a power struggle, I lose, right? We have to try another way in. It also breaks down our illusion, which is a relief that we have ultimate control and that we're responsible for everything. It reasserts that these are adults and they're responsible for their own lives. And what we're there for is to guide people, intervene when we have to, when it's a dangerous situation. But ultimately, people get to decide what they're going to do with their life. So I mentioned stages. Say it again. Yep. Go ahead.
So I'm finding that this is especially true, like in the line of work that I do. I work with those who are combating opioid use, substance abuse, and alcoholism. And oftentimes, as much as I want them to change, as much as I want them to get it, a lot of times you probably get one every 6 months that will be successful. So it's kind of like, just sitting back, kind of, doing your part of the job, but knowing that even if they become clean for a week or two, if they want to go back out the next week, that's totally their decision. There's really nothing. I can't push them to be clean. I can't make them be clean. I can only continue to support them on their journey. So I find that happens a lot in the field that I work in. You just have to let them take the wheel and drive it themselves.
It's a really important thing. But let's talk about how you influence people, right? Mm-hmm. Do you educate them about opioid use?
Yes.
Okay. So that's change, right? That's a big part of change. Do most of the clients that you work with have Narcan?
Yes.
Okay. So that's harm reduction, right? Mm-hmm. These are process changes, right? So they're safer, right?
Yes.
Okay. So do people make a harm reduction plan around Narcan? Do they have a plan? Does some of them have a plan where somebody gets high later? And
some of them, yes.
That's huge.
The buddy system.
Okay, so you're doing these huge safety plans, right? Mm-hmm. Sobriety, true sobriety is a process.
Yeah.
Right. And that what we have to do is get markers and talk about what they want to do, right? We also need to ask them if they're safer and they live longer, right? So that what? What do they want to do? So we have to look for that motivation, but you're doing the right thing, right? By the way, testing strips, do you give people testing strips?
I was just on a training last week with a lady offered, so I'm going to order some because I don't have any. And I think that would be really, really helpful.
Makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
So we need to think about these process things. You know what else testing strips do? Is they give people some control over this interaction with the drug. Mm-hmm. You also look at the positives and negatives, right? And they all can also separate themselves a little bit from the drugs because people often talk about that somebody else is in control of this high. People often think they have control of the high, but they don't, right? Yeah, right? So those are all really important things. So that's another thing with motivational interviewing is we got to figure out our goals, right?
Now, what do you do with that person that says, hey, I like doing fentanyl. I'd rather do fentanyl.
Okay.
How do you?
So then you say, okay, so first of all, we want to know what that gives them, right? You do fentanyl, so what? And a lot of people want to be numb, right? Mm-hmm. You've also got a lot of people who are combat veterans, so they're probably dealing with PTSD, right? We want to also ask them for a harm reduction perspective if anything else has ever helped, right? We want to offer resources, including things like we can figure out housing where they can have in-home aid who can be there at night when the worst of the PTSD comes up. You know this, right? Mm-hmm. So we want to offer those resources. We also want to talk about not using fentanyl. So that what? And we want to get the positives and negatives of that. So one of the things that we do is we actually have a harm reduction plan around housing. Okay. And I'm happy to send it to you. Kaya can put it on the website and that sort of stuff, but it helps guide the conversation. It's not straight harm reduction because one of the things it says is what's negotiable and what's not, which is really important in housing, right? Rent's not negotiable, but how you offer it is negotiable. So it can be really helpful.
Okay. I appreciate that.
Of course. It's a great thing you're doing. But the other thing is we need to figure out how to measure these process goals. Right?
Yeah.
And then part of that is, the paths to the goals are it. Sobriety is possible for a lot of people, but only if they go through the process, right?
Yep.
And only if they can figure out a reason for the sobriety. And I think that as we make a plan, right? Harm reduction, actually, sobriety is a perfectly fine goal, right? But you have to respect other goals. And let's figure out how we can help people be safe and do other things. And they've got to address that PTSD. And I'll tell you something is, we work a lot with the VA. A lot of the medication they offer for PTSD is not that effective, right? So they haven't fine-tuned it enough. We saw this with mental illness all through the years, right? It's a really tough thing. So it's a combination of counseling. It's a combination of, things like massage and counseling and, some stress relief, those sorts of things. But it takes a long time to get somebody into that. And I don't imagine they're really, and the VA, because they're a federal agency, has a really hard time with the fentanyl stuff, even the marijuana stuff, which is actually pretty effective. So those are things that we want to think about, and we want to think about what's available to people. And we want to be clear that it's just like a budget. We're not going to take away the thing that means the most to them, right? This is the only thing that gave relief. I would fight anybody who took it away from me, right? So that what you're doing is right. And you got to start measuring process goals, right? It's not just sobriety, because that's a setup for you and the clients, right? So we need to be careful about that. Can other people think of ways that that's coming up in your work?
Andrea, yes. So one of the things that I do, and especially a new intake or someone I'm currently dealing with, is making the goal setting a part of the conversation that we're having. And so where I would think in my own mind what priorities it would be in order to make it look right, to work, may not be the way that they see it. And so we talk about it, and recovery may not be the first thing on their agenda. It may be the third out of three, whereas I listen, I write, and if they say, well, I want to get an apartment, I want to do this and that. And so again, they're driving a car. I always say they're driving a bus. I'm just the passenger. And I may say, what, do you see that stop sign up there? If they're in control, they're always in control. So what do you think? Answer the question. The question, like, what do you think it should be? And that gives them the empowerment and courage to believe that they're actually driving the bus. And so it opens the door to another conversation, so we can start, in order. Okay, so if you can't get an apartment, if your credit's messed up, if you have a criminal background, then what do you think you need to do next? So, proposing it in a question format.
Yep,
that's worked for me. Does it always work out? No, but it empowers them to think that they're answering their own question. So
yeah, and it gives them control of the process, and that's something we want. You know what I'm going to do? I don't usually do this, but I'm going to skip to. Whoops, here it is. A goals discussion, and I'm going to do a breakout with you guys because I want you guys to see this. Okay, so I'm going to break you out, but I'm going to go through it first, and I'm going to put it in the chat. Okay, so first of all, I want you guys to, whoa, come on. Okay, so first of all, what I'm going to do, oh, maybe not. Here we go. All right. All right. So you guys see this in the chat? You see the questions in the chat? Okay, I'm going to break you up in 1 second, but I am going to go over this a little bit. You're going to go into a breakout room. You have to affirmatively accept the breakout room, okay? So one person shares an example or shares an example from yourself, but you guys, you're with colleagues here, right? Don't share an overly personal thing, just share a simple example. And then you're going to ask the person the so that question. They're going to be asked to do a goal, right? It's just exactly what I did with Robin. You want to go to school so that what? And those are the real goals, and those are the things that are going to motivate it. And as Sylvia said, we're going to connect that goal, right, to what they're trying to do. So they want to maintain housing, and they want to maintain housing because they want to get their kids back, right? So that's a big thing about motivation, right? They get to choose what they do to motivate housing, addressing different things. But the fact that they want to get their kids back is what's going to be motivating them to go through that. So you're trying to elicit from the participants, I want to get sober so that I get my kids back, or so that I get a boyfriend, or so that my mother invites me for dinner, whatever the reason is. And we're going to keep asking the questions. So if there are only two people, you're going to proceed without the observer, and the observer is going to come back and talk about it. So try this goal exercise. So I'm going to break you guys out into breakouts. Here we go. We have 40 people. So there may be more than 3 in your group, but the only way to do it is this. So I'm going to create the breakout rooms, and then I'm going to ask you guys to select them. And if you look at the chat now and you see the questions, you're going to be there. If you have questions, you can always come back to the main group. Okay. So why don't we take about 10 minutes and take a look at this? So you see them, you can join the groups and talk about the so that. I'll give you a 2-minute warning and then a 1-minute countdown. It's 10 minutes. Good. If you're having problems getting in the group, or if you join by phone, let us know and we'll figure it out. Angelo, you having problems getting in the group? You can always chat with me.
I think Angelo is under multiple, is logged on. I know I've seen like multiple names, that same name multiple times. So I'm wondering if one is like in the group. Okay, no, that one moved too.
Okay. How about Christian and Renee?
Doesn't have webcam or mic set up, so I didn't join the group. Okay. Kristen just responded in the chat. They don't have webcam or mic set up on that computer, so they didn't join.
You know what, Christian and Renee, you know what? Go in the group anyway. I know it's frustrating without having webcam, but you can chat within the group. So try that. At least you're going to hear the discussion and see if it relates to you. So try it.
This meeting is being...
Welcome back. So what did you think?
This meeting is being recorded.
Thank you. What'd y'all think? Did it make a difference? Is this something that's familiar to you? Is this something you're doing already? Sylvia was saying she is doing that a lot already, because that was her example, which made me go to it. Do you think it made a difference in the conversation? Y'all just don't want to talk to me?
I would
go ahead.
Yep. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, as you were saying, it does make a difference because not only you get to see what the client wants to work on, but you also get to kind of know them and see, you know, what they want to achieve.
Exactly. Exactly. And then do you see yourself using the things that they identified in the so that principle for motivation? think about how you attach housing to most things. Think about how we were talking about maybe attaching, dealing with substance to most things. So if they have a goal, right, they may have a goal of housing. So how does getting a criminal history attach to that? Do you think you could attach things to their long-term motivation? How does paying their rent, give me a goal that somebody said in this, so that they want to do something, so that what?
What I was talking about, my particular participant wanted to get a place because they wanted to be reunified with their child, right, that they had been separated from. So that was really important for her to be able to get that place and make sure that she had, appropriate things to make that apartment suitable. Yep. Okay, appropriate furnishings, let's say.
Appropriate furnishings, but also yes, she has to maintain that apartment. So when she starts having trouble paying the rent, or she starts having trouble with her neighbors, right?
Right.
What's the value of having the apartment to get your kids back? It's really important, right?
Yes.
So we need to figure that out. So you can attach that to what she wanted. That's a great thing.
Hey, how are you?
If we think about that, Marissa, you may want to mute that. There you go. Okay. So,
wait, oh, I thought you were in.
Whoops. Okay. There's somebody else in that room now too. All right. So that if you can think about that, and the beauty of so that is we can do it with every client. The other thing that we're trying to do is make sure that people do this across the board. And this is something that people begin to expect. And if we can get those motivations, it can really help us move forward. So thanks, Monica. That's a great thing. You know what? And don't worry about if it's a small thing, right? Because I mean, I've done whole plans around big screen TVs, getting a car, right? Getting people to maintain their housing. The other one is a date, right? So that people tell you about those things. It all helps with people. I'm going back to stages of change. And a lot of times we're working with people is everybody familiar with stages of change? Is that something you've seen before? This is a stages of change chart that puts it with staff tasks, right? I was always frustrated with stages of change because you sort of have to figure out what you're going to do in each stage, identify the stage. This helps you do that. So as people are in pre-contemplation, we want to ask questions and we want to raise awareness of obstacles to goals, but also motivation. And asking people to sow that question can really help you with that. And then we move to the pros and cons, right? As people are thinking about it. And then we move to the options, the strategies, the supports. I got to say in the preparation phase, that was always hard for me because people said, yeah, I might want to change this behavior. And I would say, okay, let's do it now. And they weren't ready, right? We have to talk about different strategies. We have to calm down a little bit. I had a thing in my notes that said, okay, once they begin to talk about this, take a deep breath, right? And then as they begin to make change, we want to support them. We want to do some relapse prevention. And the most important thing is we want new goals. And we want to use that motivation technique, that's so that principle, to get to those new goals, right? Because goals provide people with structure and purpose. So we want to think about this, how we're going to move people through. We also want to be aware that the biggest things in motivational interviewing are hope, right? People have got to think it's possible, and that comes from confidence and feelings of competence. So we want to really talk to people about what their skills are and what they're good at and what they've been able to accomplish before. It's got to be meaningful to them. That's the so that principle. But it's also about talking to people about what their experiences are and paying particular attention to cultural, racial, gender, all of these things that might affect how people approach things. And then we want to help boost people's confidence because that's how people make change, right? So we're going to support people, and we're going to also support self-efficacy, which is an optimism, which is hope and confidence. We're going to listen to people. We're going to try some reflective listening techniques. Look, reflective listening can go really badly, right? It says don't ask it as a question. If you're most comfortable putting it as a question, put it as a question. The whole thing is we want to know what people are saying. We want to say things like, getting your kids back sounds like the most important thing to you, right? I sometimes do it. I'm going to talk about what you want in a sentence because I'm going to write it down in the plan. Can you help me write this sentence? That's more comfortable for me. We're going to develop discrepancy between what the person is doing now and what they want, right? So when this person shows up to see their kids in foster care and brings $200 worth of toys and doesn't pay their rent, what's the discrepancy between that? We're also going to empathize with the person in wanting to bring their kids something when they feel like they haven't been in their lives. And we're going to talk about that. When people begin to argue or directly confront us, we're going to back off because it's telling us that we need to do another assessment, that we're going down the wrong road. We're going to adjust to it rather than saying, yes, you will. No, you won't. I don't know if you've ever been in those discussions, but I've certainly been in those discussions, more with my family than with my clients. We're going to, I talked a little bit about reflective listening. We're going to develop that discrepancy, right? But we need the information from so that, what do you want? Because if we develop discrepancy, if the goal is maintaining your housing, and we talk to them about how spending $200 on toys, right, is a problem because they can't pay rent, and the goal is to, that's a hard thing. But if we know what the real goal is, the so that is, they're maintaining housing so that they can keep their kids back, and we connect it to that, that'll help. We talked about this. I'm going through these fast. You guys are talking more than I expected, so there's a lot more in these slides, but I've been over all this stuff. We want to empathize with the person to deal with resistance. Okay? You know, when people say to you, you just don't understand what I want. You just don't understand. You couldn't understand. You weren't homeless, so you couldn't understand. You ever heard that? You know what? It sounds like everybody's an expert on your life, but nobody's listening to you. I'm going to listen to you because I think you're the biggest expert on your life. You tell me, just like what Sylvia said, you tell me what you'd like to do about this. You tell me what the next step is. We want to really empower the person. It's up to you. What makes it worth it? Where's the so that? What are you good at? We're going to bring in examples of where people have been able to overcome obstacles in the past so that people can apply those techniques. We're going to increase people's confidence and the confidence in their own behavior. You see how this is getting us out of that dynamic of push and pull? Yeah? Okay. People need to believe that change is possible. We're going to talk about that. Talk about how we're going to look at different things. You know, a really important part of this too is if people go in a direction and it doesn't work, we want to reframe that setback. Okay, that doesn't work. What are you going to try the next time? What else can we try? Right? We're going to avoid saying something that's always a temptation to me. I told you that wasn't going to work, right? I don't really say that to clients. I say that in my own head. But remember that they're doing a really important thing. They're figuring out what works for them. So, you know, when doctors do a diagnosis and they put R/O, you know what that means? It means rule out. And that's just what people are doing. The same thing doctors are doing. They're ruling it out. They're trying something that might have worked for them before. And if it doesn't work this time, our job is not to fix that. It's to engage them in trying something else. And congratulating them on making a decision and trying something and actually figuring out what works. This is the process, right? We're going to build confidence. What's a big one? Remember when you were applying for housing? Tell me the story about what you did, and we're going to pull those skills out. We're going to say things like, you know, how persistent you were with that shelter worker, that may work with SSI. Let's figure out what you did, and let's figure out how you can do that again. Okay.
Andre, I have a question for you.
Yes, good. Yep.
Do you think, or how do you feel about role playing in some situations? Not all the time. If a person's in the encounter telling you that they want to do something, they want to advocate, they want to get their criminal background, they want to apply for an expungement, and they're kind of timid, and do you think it's appropriate to say, well, let's role play. I'll be the person that you want to seek help with, and you come in and you be yourself and ask for what you need.
Yep.
And in doing so in these encounters, maybe they can find their strength, their weaknesses, and that's an opportunity for the worker to slide in and give some assistance with that.
Yep. So yeah, I think role playing is a great idea. I think that I would add to it, and it's part of a skill building ritual, right? So the first thing we do before we role play with somebody is we plan out together what the person is going to say, right? And then we let them try it. In some cases, if you mentor people, so let me give you a simple example. They need to switch a doctor's appointment, right? So we can model it for them. We can provide education. We can model how to do it. We can model it for them. We can debrief it and ask them to pull out some skills that they may be comfortable doing. And then we can practice it with them doing it. So you can put a role play in there. If the person wants to do it themselves, we can start with a role play, right? And then debrief it. The most important thing about the role play is that we're able to pull out what skills they used, and they're able to pull out what skills they used, right? So we can do it any number of ways. There is a caution here, right? Role playing and using a skill building technique, including mentoring, right? And including the debrief, takes a lot longer than you doing it for them, right? Somebody asked me to do something, it takes me 2 minutes. Me teaching somebody how to do it, it probably takes an hour. So that, and I would encourage that a lot, but I also know the reality is you guys are busy, right? It also is an effective prevention technique for crisis, and that might be one of the big reasons you guys are so busy, right? So teaching people do this themselves is really valuable. What we usually did in my own program is I asked people to do the role-playing technique once a week and start there, right? With one client, and then move up, because people managing time also affects this. Do I think it's a good technique? Yes. Do I think it's the best technique? Absolutely. But how many clients do you have?
We have up to 25 people, but I caution on the side because it's based on discerning if it depends on the relationship I have with the participant, or some may say client.
Yep.
That is discerning the relationship I have with the client, and it's on the side of advocacy, side of empowering them. So that's not good for everybody, but depending on the relationship I have, and looking on the side of advocacy so that they feel empowered, that they see the change. So it's not good for everybody, but
I also think that part of that assessment is if advocacy and empowerment are a big part of your job, that you want to try it with everybody eventually, right? But you got to start slow. That's my only caution. But I think it's a great thing. I think it's absolutely a great thing. All right. Here we go. I'm going to give you all an example, and I want you to put these things in the chat. I'm not going to do a breakout because you guys have been talking, and I actually planned for this group not to talk as much. So this is good. I would much rather you guys talk. So look at this one. You have a woman enrolled in supportive housing. She's gotten a job twice and quit twice. You ask her about it. She says, so what? She'll get the money from her boyfriend, who also has a history of abuse of her. She likes her apartment and keeps it well. She likes to cook. She talked about getting a bigger apartment when she first began, but she also knows that she needs to increase her income in order to live well in supportive housing. She really can't live on the money she's getting. She really can't live with no income, and the boyfriend hanging around is causing problems. And there's also that history of abuse. Okay. So where's the motivation to change this situation? Are you comfortable with this situation where she brings the abusive boyfriend back in because she needs money? No. So where's the motivation for her to take a look at this situation? What are the things that you're seeing that she's doing well? Think about one of the motivations is she likes her housing. She keeps her apartment well. She likes to cook. She doesn't want to be homeless, right? But we also need to compare it to when she was living with this boyfriend. How is this different, right? These are things that are important to her, and how is this different? Are there ways that she can increase her income without being dependent on somebody else? Yes? No? We know that the housing and keeping her housing is important for her, right? Let's think about different ways that she could do that. The boyfriend is one way, right? But are there other ways? She could get some entitlements. She might be able to apply for entire benefits. She might be able to get a part-time job. She might be able to do other things. She has a hard time with the job, so you want to figure out what that's about. We want to ask her, you got a job originally so that what? Sometimes the so that. Marte, are you trying to talk to us? You're muted. Are you talking? No? Okay, you got somebody else in your office. I get it. It's confusing, right? So, okay. So think about it. So what's your plan with this person? You can put it in the chat. Oh, I got a lot of chats here. She can look for jobs, figuring out what she likes to do. That's important. So the only reason to get a job is not for money. That's a good thing. Maybe something that she likes to do. She can go to culinary school. Great idea. You're going to take that motivation of her being a cook and you're going to take a look at it. She needs to become, let's see, codependent on the boyfriend and look for other things. It's hard to not become codependent when you really don't have any money. She can look for jobs. Yep. Get a part-time job. That's true. Ask her what kind of job she likes to do. That's a great thing, right? Yep. Keeping her apartment, cooking, those are big motivations. Asking her to look for a hobby. That's a really interesting one, Sylvia. That's a great one. But reviewing the program guidelines and remembering how valuable she is. Yes. So you're going to go for hope. You're going to go for competence, and you're going to go for confidence. Working, shelter, 2 jobs. Yep. She seems to be totally comfortable on an element when it comes to her own housing. That's a really good point. Culinary school. She can look for jobs. Yes. She can let somebody know that she is being abused. Yeah, we're going to have to help her talk about that, right? And that's the positives and negatives. Absolutely. She can educate herself on abusive relationships. Good point, right? It doesn't have to be that. Maybe she can actually talk to other people about it. Is she working with a therapist? That's a good thing. Support groups, absolutely. So you guys have it, right? You just implemented motivational interviewing in this situation. Great. Okay. So it's open-ended questions that you're talking about, affirming the person's competency and confidence, listening to what people really want, which is what reflective listening, and summarizing. You're doing it all. You're checking out the assumptions. You're creating an environment of empathy so she can talk to you. You're doing the positives and negatives. You don't have to agree with what they're trying, but you guys are open to listening to why it's important to her. You can't replace something unless you know why it's important. The big thing, okay, so being aware of intonation, that's my problem, right? I do that sometimes. You can also use a decisional balance sheet here. You know what those are? It's basically a piece of paper with a cross about it. The good things about my housing, the not so good things about my housing, the good things about maybe changing the relationship, the not so good things about changing my relationship. You want people to engage in this critical thinking because it allows them to internalize this stuff, right? Because you don't want the slide back. You will get a certain amount of slide back. Okay. So how are we doing on time? Okay. So I am going to put these cases in the chat box and I'm going to go over them. And the question is, what is your plan? Okay, sorry, I could be smoother at this. You'd think after all this Zooming I would be, but I am not. Okay. So it's in two pieces, so I'm going to give you the other piece. Oh my God. All right. I didn't get the whole thing. All right. You can add that part. Okay. So the cases are in there, right? And these are the cases. We're really just doing the top two. So I want you to take the case and come up with a plan. Okay. Using the motivational interviewing techniques. So I'm going to divide you guys up in the same groups you were in before. You're going to take 10 minutes and you're going to make a plan. Okay, but think about using the motivational and interviewing techniques. And what I'm going to ask you is what you've tried, right? And you can describe it any way you want. You don't have to use the motivational interviewing language, but I want you to use the techniques. Okay, so they're in the cases. Okay, so you can join the rooms. And if you have questions, just come back to the main room. By the way, it's not because we're incredibly lazy or want a break. We don't come into the rooms because people stop talking when we come into the rooms. So Kaya and I will be right here and we're happy to answer any questions. Okay, so you can join a group. You've got the stuff in the chat. Give it a try. Lucy, you can stay with us if you want. You could do it either way. Renee is having problems. Janice was back before. Janice, there you go. Kaya, you're on mute. And what motivational?
We thought with Tom, seeing as though he ducks away every time you mention a job or applying for benefits, that, you know, there may be some issues around that. So maybe trying to find out if there's some issues around it. Maybe he's illiterate. He doesn't know how to apply for a job, or he can't read to apply for benefits. You know, maybe he's had a bad experience, you know, with applying for a job or benefits, but there's something that's around that issue that's causing him to not want to deal with it and leave and go the opposite direction. So we thought the first thing we tackled was maybe trying to see what you know, issues he may have around that. Is it cultural? Is it, you know, gender based? Is it whatever? So we thought that would be a starting point, and then go from there.
It's a really good point, is let him tell his story, right?
Yeah.
Let him tell his story. That's a good motivational technique, and that's right. It's a really good example about focusing on process, right? The goal becomes the process instead of the goal becomes getting benefits, right? That's a really good point. Anybody else do you want to talk about?
Hi.
Hi.
We did Tom also. And I think the biggest thing that I took from what we discussed was building a rapport with the clients so that they felt comfortable enough to talk to you about like the things that Robin was saying. Because without the initial rapport and the comfort and them feeling comfortable, they're not going to open up to you about, you know, being illiterate or not having, or whatever the reasons are behind not applying for benefits or not looking for a job or, you know, something like that. But he clearly felt comfortable enough to ask for half the sandwich. So I don't know.
But maybe that's the only thing he could imagine, right?
Right. Like maybe he was so hungry he couldn't focus on anything else. I don't know.
Yeah. So it's really right? And we want to get some hope, but we also want to know what the barriers are. And the only way we can do that is to empathize with the client and listen to the client. And that's a really good reflective listening period. That's great. Anybody else want to say something about this?
Yeah, I had a person that was afraid to get a job, and he would go out and fill the applications, and he even get hired. But he wouldn't go back to the job. So I asked him why. And he told me, he said, because he had fear of people.
It's a good question to ask him why. It's a good question to ask him why.
Yeah, because he would get hired, then he wouldn't go to that one, then he would go to another in the same week and get hired from another place, wouldn't go. So I said, well, why are you not taking these jobs? And he said, because I have fear of people. So I explained to him, I said, you know what you can do? There's a lot of people that hang out at Dunkin' Donuts. Go sit around and hang out at Dunkin' Donuts. Go to the park. Start mingling with people and see if you can overcome that fear. That's only how you're going to do it. But he would go to job and apply, get the job, but never take it.
Okay. So that's a big barrier, but he told you what the issue was, right? Yeah. And you gave him some resources. That's a great thing, right? That's a big part of this thing. Did he try it?
No, he didn't. No.
Can you think of an example where he was good with people and he could do it? How about the example of
people that he knew?
Okay.
People that he knew and he was comfortable, he would talk to them. So that's why I told him, maybe you should just go outside the Dunkin' Donuts and just mingle.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people sit at Dunkin' Donuts and, they have their coffee and they talk. But
so, does he have any friends who have jobs?
No,
Okay.
He's a loner.
Okay.
Maybe it's social anxiety. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yep. Maybe he does have social anxiety, but you know what?
Mm-hmm.
That was a good example about how to make friends. Ask him how he thinks he could be more comfortable on a job. What would make him more comfortable? You might also want to ask him how he managed those interviews, because you have to be good with people to manage an interview.
Right.
Good at it, right? He got hired every time.
Or even a job where he may, where he can work alone, because not every job you have to be around people.
Yep.
Andrea,
those are all our jobs right now, or they were during the pandemic, right?
Andrea, for some reason, group number one, we're coming back delayed because you guys are already in conversations and we're still in the group.
Huh.
And for some reason, we were actually late in the conversation. I don't know.
Sorry.
Yeah,
I don't know what happened. I closed the groups and maybe group one got, let me look. Huh.
Well, our group also gets delayed every time. I think one group just stays and we all join because every time we come back there, you guys are talking.
Yeah. We're having the same problem. But we chose Tom, the group number one. They were excellent. Becky talked about why does he think he's having problems with applying with jobs and not being able to work. My approach is a little different. And William and Harmony and Carmen brought up very good points. But I took apart each sentence. And so when we got to this sentence, when he wants bus tickets, food pantry rides, and even emergency canned goods, you keep in your office, which means he's observant.
Yeah.
And there could be some entitlement in his mind, although everything that folks were saying, what I heard is true. And so once he asks for half your sandwich, meaning that you're eating in front of him, that is a time to pause because the word duck stands out in my mind. Why are you hiding from me? Why don't you come in and talk to me? And then you can have half my sandwich and engage him in an encounter because he's relaxed. Here's half my, come on in my office and talk to me for a minute. I'm going to give you my sandwich and let's talk. And then talk about, want to address the food issues and say, what do you like in the food pantry? Tell me what you like and I will fix a bag for you later and come back and get it. Because he doesn't have any structure and the entitlement is there, but having him see that you're interested, he's hungry, and what do you need your bus pass for? Are you looking for a job? Do you have a medical appointment? Tell me what's going on with you. So tone, pitch, and friendly environment and making him feel like he's a part of it while I'm giving him structure because we don't give up, but it just has to be some structure, but the engagement encounter is so important. And then seeing what you can get.
So I think that's really important. And you're building his skills because you're talking about a success he had with engaging with you. And you're also putting more structure around that engagement. Sure, you can have half my sandwich. Come on, let's eat together. But you know what? Let's talk while we're doing it, right? So you're taking a situation where he's comfortable. I'm taking your words and you're expanding it to give him some confidence in this interaction, right? So a guy that's afraid of people, he's working with you. It may still be that he's illiterate. It may still be that he's afraid of failure. It may still be, we're not going to get to those barriers until we get people comfortable enough to talk about this stuff. And I think that that's a really important thing. Motivational interviewing a lot of times is based on the relationship because you've got to know. You've got to be able to get people to open up to you because you need the information, right? And so I think that's really important. That's a beautiful way to apply it. Mm-hmm. Also, giving him some choice in terms of the food pantry is a very smart thing, right? And it's also going to be an assessment because you're going to see what he can do. Maybe he can write it down. Maybe he can't. Maybe he can tell you, right? So those are things that you're going to look at. Those are great. You guys are nailing this. Any other comments about that exercise? No.
I wanted to do Georgie from our group.
Let's do it.
So Georgie, so Lori had some good points about Georgie. It seemed as if the caseworker probably wasn't asking her why. So she's constantly in the hospital. And she might be in an abusive relationship. So she could be using the K2 to, enter the relationship into like a safe space. Uh-huh. And that's why she's letting, the tenants know that you're not bright because she could easily have bruises. If you just, asked her like how things are going, it just seems like she's not asking her about that, but she's asking her about the K2 and why she's getting high instead of like what's going on inside, what's going on in your home. Perhaps something is going on in the home that she doesn't want to be there. So just trying to figure that out. So, and then, you know, because if she did open up, we can potentially get her into therapy, or maybe into like a home for a supportive home for, you know, abused women. There's a lot there. There's a lot there that's not there, but potentially, I think, or Lori, we thought that it could be some type of abuse going on.
So Akila, you made a beautiful switch there, right? Oftentimes our job, we feel like our job is to stop using K2. I use K2 because I hate K2, right? I mean, it's a mess, right? And I can't imagine any benefits anybody gets from K2, but you imagine them right away, right? And you went to, why is this working for you? Not, this is all the bad things about it, but why is this working for you? And what's behind this? It's sort of a version of that, so that it's a beautiful thing. So, because unless people can identify the benefits of the behavior that's not doing that, they can't identify any negatives. So that's a great way to apply this. That was beautiful.
Yeah, we also said that like she probably doesn't enjoy using the K2, but it's helping her to find a safe space, you know, get out of something. It could be emotionally, it can be with a person that's abusing her physically. We don't know unless we ask her.
Yeah, exactly. And finding out the reason. And, you know, and it's, I used K2 because it's in the most extreme, right? Because I mean, but everybody does things for a reason, and there's something she's getting out of it. And you went right for that. That was a great thing. Thanks. Anybody else talking about this? Want to talk about it? No? Okay.
Thank you, Keela.
Yeah, thank you, Keela. Okay. So we want people to talk about change, right? And we want them to go back and reflect on things that worked for them before. And I'm going to pull up the thing about why Sylvia said, why is this relationship with me working, right? You're getting the things you need, and you're clearly able to ask for them. Are there pieces of this relationship that you can take? And let's identify the skills, right? Let's also assess the skills, which is the food pantry thing. It's sitting down, talking while you're eating. Those are beautiful things. We also want people to have some hope for the future and be able to imagine their lives. But I have to give the caution of most of the people we worked with have been in crisis their entire lives, right? And it's very hard for them to think ahead. So what Akila is doing is figuring out ways that they can identify what they're getting out of it, and we can pull skills from that. Unless people talk about the positives and negatives, they can't talk about how they want things to be different, right? Until they can identify that these are the positives and I've got to continue these things. Doesn't have to be with a K2, doesn't have to be with the other stuff, but how can we continue these things? It's really hard for people to move forward. We also want to look at what are the realistic options, and how we do that is through the rule out principle. They're going to try some things, right? But we want to be there to assess it with them, to debrief it with them, to figure out the skills that they used, and to try something else. We don't want people giving up after they try once. Another question is, what are the best results that you can think of after making this change? And those are the so that principles, right? If you stop using the K2, so that what? What can you imagine getting out of this? Unless we can get that, it's really hard to get people's motivation. Another thing is, you guys mentioned this, it's getting people to focus on what's most important to them. And then our job is to elevate the importance of some things and decrease the importance of others. So let me give you an example. How important is keeping housing to you? 4. Even the woman with a nice housing, right? Even the woman who is keeping her housing really well, which shows commitment, right? And was cooking in her housing, would probably say 4 compared to the other things in their lives. We want to elevate the importance of keeping housing by talking about what's important to her about housing. You're a fabulous cook, right? Keep your apartment really well. It's a model. Friends coming over. That's a 9. Why? Right? What's important about friends coming over? Are there other ways you can do that? Let's talk about that. Drinking with friends or using with friends, 10. For most of the clients I worked with that they were having people over that they were using with, it was really a 20, but since I only gave them 1 to 10, they could only say a 10. Let's use Keela's example. What are you getting out of that? Right? What's important? I'd be lonely if my friends didn't come over. You know, using this ruler taught me something is that I said, okay, have you ever considered maybe hanging out with your friends someplace else besides this apartment, right? And they looked at me like I was crazy and they said, no, when people come over to my apartment, they bring the drugs. If I go over to somebody else's or go in a park, I got to bring my own drugs and I don't have money for that. And I thought, okay, that was an interesting part of problem solving. That was honestly something I never considered, right? So we're going to know what the barriers are. We're going to have the conversation. Getting people to stop bothering me, 10. Let's talk about how people bother you. They're going to talk about you bothering them and talking about this. How could it be helpful so we can work together? It's called a change ruler, and it can sometimes really narrow things down. It's a key element of motivational interviewing. Has anybody ever tried this before? No?
I like it though. I think I'm going to try it with my group.
Yeah, it's fun, right?
Yeah.
And people really like it. And it's another way to get at what you guys have been getting at solidly through this whole presentation is what people really think. It's another way to do it. You know, I want to talk about tools sometimes and writing things down in charts is that, and this is a side thing, but I just want to talk about it for a minute. You familiar with executive function? Executive function is things like focusing skills, organizational skills, the ability to task prioritize, the ability to task sequence, right? I do this thing first and this thing next and this thing, and the ability to take verbal directions. There's other things too. Whoops. Good God, I thought I turned that off. All right. So what those executive skills are developed in late adolescence, early adulthood, right? So what were your people doing in late adolescence, early adulthood? Often the onset of mental illness, it's often the onset of substance abuse. Problems often start in, for Robin, these people were in combat, right? They weren't working on their executive functions. So one of the reasons I like motivational interviewing is it gives us a lot of these charts, even the thing about positives and negatives, and you can write it down on a chart. And it's easier for people to comprehend and hold on to if it's visual, right? Rather than giving people verbal directions, because we've got a lot of people. We want to increase our executive functions, the problem solving that we've been working on in this session and that you guys have been working on all along, the confidence building, the feelings of competence, all of those things will increase their executive functions. But this is really remedial. And so that's another reason why it's really helpful sometimes to use these kinds of charts. And it's something to think about because people comprehend it in a different reason. Doesn't mean people are dumb. It just means that developmentally, they were preoccupied with other things during the time that people often develop these skills. So think about using some of these charts for that reason, as well as it's helpful to people because they can see it. You also want something for people to take with them, right? So the other thing that we do is when we teach people about management services relationship, we teach people tenancy skills. We're actually recommending a workbook style sort of thing so that people have charts they can take with them. So it's all sorts of things that people are able to use, but think about the chart things as a chart, but also think about what that will bring you and how that will forward the conversation. And these are all consistent with the things that you guys are already doing. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay. So eventually we want to get to the point where people use the so that and the other things as a reason to change, right? And eliciting change talk means that we have a sense of where people want to go, even if it's like in 20 minutes, right? We want to elicit those things. We tried to sow that principle. It's also questions like, where do you see yourself living next year? Who's in your life? We want to look at those aspirations because those are going to provide the motivation to move forward. What would be different? Positives and negatives about changing behavior. And we want to work with people to decrease the negatives and increase the positives. What would be different if you didn't change the behavior? That's that sheet again, right? Have you tried something similar in the past? How did that work? You want to really increase people's confidence, but these are the questions you can ask. You want people to tell you the story. You know, there's a form of therapy called narrative therapy where people tell you the story. Let people tell the story of the successes. How did they have successes? And we can pull out those skills from there. You know, even for case managers, right? I do a lot of case conferencing with all sorts of providers across Connecticut. And the one thing I always require is they tell me when something worked well, because I think people can learn from that and we can pull things out as opposed to always focusing on the barriers, right? And that we want people to increase their competence and do the things that worked again. We want the same thing with clients. I do this with my family. I do this with my friends. I do this with everybody, right? Tell me the story and really listen to the story, and people can learn enormous things from that. We want to ask people to think critically and evaluatively about their actions and goals. And as we get to that point, we're moving on. I also want to say that the number one protective factor in getting people to maintain housing, which is something we want, or even move on, is problem-solving skills. And so what we're working on all through this is the problem-solving skills. So in order to do that, we need to do, Keila said that one of the things that she does, right, is get people to debrief how they did something. And I think that that's really important. So don't ignore the debrief. But as Sylvia said, this stuff takes time, right? And it takes relationship. So those are the things we want to focus on originally, but we want to also take all these components and try to apply them across the board. So one of the things that are big takeaways is focusing on behavior that interferes with housing, right? Oops, I left Bruce in there. That's really important, but we also want to look at what people's goals are. This is, oh God, this is a mistake is what it is. This is a specific example, but I'm gonna take that out. Sorry, but I took that out. So the thing to think about here is motivational interviewing as a counseling style. It's applied in the context of the relationship, right? Which is something you guys said. It's a counseling style, but this is not full motivational interviewing, right? Full motivational interviewing is a counseling technique. This is the beginning of motivational interviewing, which is what we do in supportive housing, right? We're working on an alliance. The idea is that it can be collaborative and it has effects on other things that you're expected to do, such as the planning and that sort of thing. One of the biggest problems in a plan is that clients don't own it. They see it as our plan, right? And if we can work on this collaborative style, it improves the planning as well. It requires you be actually there with the person and hear them, reflect it back, verify it, work alongside the person, and value their experience. Motivational interviewing is very affirming, and we want to value people's experience, and we want them to take those and apply it to the next thing. This is the spirit of MI, and we want to use it as much as possible. And we want to dance. We don't want to wrestle, right? No headlocks required, this sort of thing. So that's what we want to do. Do people have questions or comments? I've got some references I can go through with you. But are there things that would be helpful? We also are interested in what else you want. What would help you You guys are a long way towards implementing this. What would help you with this process?
So, and going back to the slide where people can get stuck from past experiences, I'm noticing that a lot of times in my group has been running for this is our 3rd year. And so a lot of people have been around a long time and are comfortable talking. And more so lately, they're talking, men and women alike are talking about being molested or touched or raped when they were younger. And it's really got them stuck in that place. And so, you know, I do the recovery part of it, but to get them to actually want to go to therapy or but they feel comfortable talking to me in the group. How do we combat them getting out of that stuck place?
Okay. It's a really good question. And let's talk about the difference between your group and therapy, right? Therapy scares people. And part of what scares them is the structure. And therapy is a lot of work. People have to be ready to look at themselves. Where I find people are most comfortable doing that, and I'm a big fan of therapy, I'm not discouraging therapy, but people have to work and be able to disclose in limited amounts within a structure. So in your group, there is a structure, right? Therapy is also tends to be individual, and that can be very scary for people, right? It's more comfortable with buddies. So we want to figure out what really works about this group, right? And we want to figure out how we can help people do those things. So we want to point out their skills in the group. We want to ask them about therapy if it's ever worked for them before. Some people, I mean, therapy opens people up, which is the scariest thing that people can imagine sometimes, right? Particularly if you're working with a lot of people with PTSD, which I'm sure you are, right? Is that being opened up means that the flashbacks will get worse, right? The sleeping will get worse. Those things will get worse. So asking them what, you know, you're opening up in this group, what would make you feel safe? What is it about this group that would make you feel safe? And then you've got to have a therapist who could do that. I've got to say that for your group, the VA is the best because they know how to do this, right? So I want to give you another example, right? All of us have people in our family or friends who have been in wars, right? How much do they talk about their experience? Not at all, right? It's a fear of opening up. So it's almost a cultural thing that happens in the military, is you can only talk about it with people who have been there. People are afraid of being judged. People are afraid of being flooded with feelings. So you want to ask them what's going to help them feel safe. And you want to ask them if talking about it helps, right? And if talking about it doesn't help, what helps, right? I understand where you're going with recovery. You want people to have a way to deal with this without blocking themselves out, right? Which is a real foundation of recovery. But we need to find a place where it's safe. And people are really overwhelmed by this. And PTSD treatment takes a long time, right? But helping people feel safe and helping people feel in control, right? That's from trauma-informed care. And that's a really important part. So that's what I would talk to them about, right? You know, I ran a women's shelter for a while, and every one of those women had been abused, every one of them. And we talked to a lot of therapy counselors, and we got a lot of therapy. We got a lot of trauma-informed training. And one of the things is they were in such a crisis point because they were in a shelter that part of the thing was to help them seal it off, right? In appropriate ways, and help them deal with the trauma, but not open people up. Because if you open people up, they're really vulnerable. And that was in a shelter place, right? It wasn't in permanent supportive housing. So we moved to the next step. Offer people opportunities, but be careful. And that we need to realize that these things are very overwhelming for people. And you work with a lot of people who have been abused. You work with a lot of people who have been in really horrible situations. Everybody does, right? For homeless women, the rate of trauma is like 100%. I mean, sometimes the trauma is having to trade a part of yourself, which sometimes means sexually, sometimes means other, to get your basic needs met. That's a trauma, right? And sometimes it's a battering relationship, all sorts of relationships. Combat veterans bring a whole different level to this, right? But I think that the same principles apply. So that, do you guys meet with the people from the VA who are PTSD specialists? No, might be helpful. Where are you, Robin?
Middletown.
Yeah, the PTSD, trauma-informed stuff can really be helpful, but it has to be within a context, right? And the context is, if you're providing emergency services, it's a different context than if you have a little more time, like in supportive housing, right? But I think these things are really important. It's a really important question. We want to go for the motivation, but that hooking them up with therapy might be a very long-term goal. Some people are ready to do it right now, but some people aren't.
Yeah, a lot of them aren't.
Yeah, but it's scary.
It's scary because they want to talk to me about it and in the group, but I'm not equipped to help them with that part of it.
They feel safe.
You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
So it's.
But they feel safe with you and they feel safe in a group. So let's see how we can recreate that experience, right? So that people can feel safe enough for that experience.
The majority of my caseload are, most of the folks, 95% of them are in therapy or in support groups.
Yep.
And dual diagnosed with substance use and mental health. So therapy is good. Some folks are reluctant to it, the other 5%, but the majority of people are in therapy.
Is it part of the culture of your agency is to get people in therapy?
Well, it's we have different programs in our agency. The Coach 2 through Demas, we have our targeted population is substance use and mental health.
Yep.
And carry a caseload up to 18 to 25 participants or clients. We use the word participants. Yep. And with this population of substance use comes mental health. I have a particular person on my caseload. When you mentioned sexual abuse and rape, that's happened to her more than one time. Yep. It's almost like, it happens. And because I've done it to get what I needed, but in times where I didn't welcome it, the shame and guilt of not being able to report it because they felt like they brought it on themselves.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of feelings, but also being overwhelmed by feelings. And one of my clients described to me once that when they talked about it, they felt like things were rolling over them. And the problem is it didn't end in the session. It rolled over them for days and days and days afterwards. And that was something they wanted to avoid. And then we had to work with that, right? So that I think that's true. I also think that how many people are actively working therapy in the people that you use? I mean, there's all different levels of therapists, let's be real, right? How many people are actively working therapy, do you think? 95% is really high.
Well, not to be in therapy and to actively work it. We're talking about two different things.
Yes, we are. We're talking about two different things.
Two separate things. Because with relapse alone and then revisiting some people are literally in recovery because of the trauma. They've actually used it as a coping skill and mechanism to forget what actually happened.
It's an interesting thing. I want to just put on that because sometimes the structure of a recovery, particularly an AA-oriented recovery, will really help people with that. Really help people with that because the structure makes them feel safe. That's what I was going for with Robin. But I think that, getting people to really work therapy is a whole big thing. You guys, I said I wouldn't hold you longer than I said I would hold you. So I'm going to close this up. I'm going to also tell you that there's some resources on motivational interviewing here. Kaya's going to talk a little bit about upcoming trainings quickly, and then we're going to close out. So Kaya, can you just tell people what's coming up?
Yes, I can do that. So starting, so far, look, most of our trainings are on Mondays. So next Monday, the 14th, from 10 to 12, we have working in supportive housing, orientation for new case managers. That next Monday after that is the 21st of March. We have service planning for supportive housing. And then the last Monday in March, the 28th, is racial trauma and mental health. So those are the next upcoming trainings, and yeah, for the next 3 weeks or so, so the rest of March. So please go ahead, if you haven't done so already, to register for those trainings. Lastly, I put the evaluation for today's training in the chat. So please take some time and go ahead and fill out that evaluation. We do take your feedback into consideration for future training. So please go ahead and do that. And then lastly, in the next week or so, I usually try to do them within a 2, max 3 week period. You'll receive your certification for today's training. So if you are under anyone else's account, or if the name isn't shown correctly, go ahead and send me an email. I'll put my email in the chat so that I put the correct name and I have the correct email address to send your certificate to.
So let me translate that. If you don't get it within a week, don't email Kaya, right?
I'm working on it.
Wait 2 weeks. Okay. You guys, it has been a real pleasure. This was a really fun session. I really appreciate all your input. And I look forward to seeing you guys again. Thank you.
Thank you.